Hello, good evening. I thank you for being with us tonight. Our coverage continues here on News Nation, where it is 6 o'clock in Washington, 1 a.m. in Israel, as missiles and drones continue to rain down across the Middle East. The U.S. continuing its assault on all fronts, from the air, taking out Iran's killer drones. And from the sea, Navy-guided missile destroyers pummeling Iran with unrelenting power. Israel, as well, hammering targets inside the heart of Tehran, striking the building where roughly 90 Iranian clerics were set to meet to elect their next supreme leader. But U.S. forces and Americans across the region tonight remain in harm's way. For example, flames and smoke seen rising near the U.S. consulate in Dubai, struck by Iranian drones. The commander-in-chief today outlining the necessities, as he sees it, for Operation Epic Fury, invoking the ultimate fear.
If we don't stop them, or if we didn't stop them, or if we didn't start, they've been decimated. But if we didn't do what we're doing right now, you would have had a nuclear war, and they would have taken out many countries, because you know what? They're sick people. They're mentally ill, sick people.
Retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert with me here in moments. Libby Dean with the president over at the White House. But first to our man on the ground there in the Middle East tonight, Robert Sherman, live for us once again. Hello, Robert.
Hey there, Blake. Well, the danger is ever present for Americans here in the Middle East, tonight being the consummate example, with Qatar's Ministry of Defense confirming 2 ballistic missiles targeted their territory. One was shot down. The other struck Al Udeid Air Base, our largest base in the region. No casualties were reported, but it's the latest episode of Americans coming under fire. The U.S. consulate in Dubai targeted by an Iranian drone. The State Department confirming that it slammed into the parking lot next to one of the buildings, sparking the flames that you see on your screen. No casualties reported there. Just 24 hours after the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh was struck by Iranian drones. And we also had an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait as well. This is becoming a growing trend. The U.S. military is now focused on striking Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and their stockpiles in order to protect Americans abroad, because that is viewed as being the most imminent threat, what Iran puts in the air. And the goal is to knock those out before Iran is able to launch them. But the strikes are going both ways, with Israel carrying out a strike on the Assembly of Ministers, which is taking place in Iran to elect the new supreme leader. Local media on the ground there reports that the building was flattened. But according to local media there, the meeting had already taken place and none of the ministers were hurt, and there were no casualties among the voting group. Iran does say that we should be hearing about who the new supreme leader will be soon. That formal announcement should be made in the coming days. Blake?
Robert, in Israel tonight, as you speak to folks there and as they enter day 4, or finish day 4 where you are in the Middle East, what's the sense that you're getting from the people that you're talking to there on the ground as to how they feel this operation is being carried out, both from the United States and from Israel?
I can tell you, Blake, that in the lead up to this is something that the Israeli public largely wanting to see Iran struck, believing that it would bring their tensions down from all the groups they see in the region. For what they've seen so far, I would actually say the number of ballistic missile attacks here in Israel has steadily gone down over the last couple of days, which is giving people here more optimism that maybe Iran's long-range ballistic missile capabilities have been degraded. Right now, I would say optimism is high.
All right. Robert Sherman, live for us there as his reporting continues in the Middle East. Bad cell signal for a moment, but Robert will be with us throughout the night in the upcoming days. Now over to the White House, Libby Dean with what the Trump administration is saying this evening. Libby?
Blake, what we heard from senior Trump administration officials today is them laying out the absolute breakdown in these negotiations with Iran. They happened just last Thursday and just a day before actually President Trump greenlit this operation in Iran. And one official today on this phone call that lasted an hour long describing the Iranians' nearly 10-page proposal that they brought to that last round of negotiations as Swiss cheese. because it had so many holes in it. And those negotiators also accusing the Iranians of playing games in those final days to draw out these talks. Those negotiators not talking at all with the Iranians in the days since, as we know the big question of who the administration, who President Trump wants to see in power in Iran now that they've taken out the Ayatollah. Here's the president on that today.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also.
Also on the president's mind today, Blake, energy prices, which continue to climb since Iran had warned that they would actually attack ships going through that Strait of Hormuz. Now the president saying if it's necessary, the United States Navy will escort tankers through that strait, Blake.
Just some of the backdrop tonight. Libby Dean over at the White House. Libby, thank you. With me now, John Teichert, retired Brigadier General, back with us tonight as we continue to watch the ongoings there in the Middle East. General, thanks for being here this evening. So here's what we saw today. Central Command putting out video of missiles being destroyed. We saw video, the missile launchers. We saw videos of the Iranian drones being destroyed. What's been the game plan from the United States and Israel here in the past 24 hours, and where do you expect this to go?
Blake, in order to destroy Iran's capability to project power, those missiles, those drones, there are three primary enablers. Number one, to continue to strike their command and control sites, so Iran is fighting deaf, dumb, and blind. Number two, maintaining air superiority, taking out the air defense sites so that it's a permissive environment for us to flow in masses of aircraft, that even those that are not stealthy. And then number three, leveraging exquisite intelligence so we know exactly where the targets are that we're looking to strike and what the priorities should be.
So when you talk about the exact intelligence and where to strike, I want to show some context here for a second. Here's Iran and Alaska, which we know is the biggest state here in the U.S. Let's show that next to each other. It's basically the exact same size, and you can see how big Iran is superimposed up against the United States, nearly 650,000 square miles. So as we get into day 5 and then maybe week 2, week 3, week 4, how is the United States and Israel going to figure out where they want to go in here to strike next?
Blake, fortunately, it's going to continue to be a permissive environment for our forces because we've taken out the air defenses, and we do have exquisite intelligence, but now we need to decide what should be our priority effort. You don't just strike individual missiles, you strike the launchers or the warehouses or the production facilities, but it really becomes a prioritization game to cover this area in the right possible way.
Here was President Trump and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, earlier today.
You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks as, frankly, the two most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terroristic regime and defang it.
They're still lobbing some missiles. At some point, they won't even be able to do that because we're hitting all of their carriers.
You were nodding along with Rubio there. Why?
Well, I think in general, he is absolutely right that we are intensifying the strikes. And there's two primary reasons that we're able to do so. Number one, because we've destroyed our defenses, which means several more aircraft that otherwise couldn't go into country are able to start striking. And then number two, they don't have to travel the 1,000 miles to get to Iran because our Gulf partners are starting to allow strikes from those countries that are a lot closer.
So this is where the United States and Israel have struck inside Iran. This is the northwest part of the country there. Explain why you think that's significant.
In addition to those target sets, Blake, that I described previously, we're also starting to strike internal security sites, those sites that are preventing the uprising of protests or opposition groups. But I think the Northwest is important because the most permissive way for material to flow in and opposition groups to flow in from outside of Iran is in the northern part of Iraq.
So you say if there's some sort of regime change or movement coming into the country.
I think the likely way that would happen is material from the Northwest and then radiating towards Tehran from the more permissive environment in the northwest of the country.
So this was in Dubai today. Now you can go back to that video real quick. So this was in Dubai today. There was an Iranian drone that struck near it was near the consulate, the U.S. consulate there. Basically, they said in a parking lot, and you saw the scene there. I want to show real quick where Iran has been striking as well. They've been going sort of all over the region and all over the map. How much longer do you think we expect to see this?
they have been haphazard in their strikes, but it doesn't mean that they're not effective. And even though their command and control has been shredded, there are individual missiles and individual drone operators that are able to start striking, and some of those are going to get through, and we're going to start to systematically prioritize striking those power projection capabilities. But then eventually it's going to be a little bit like Scud hunting in 1991, where we're going after individual threats instead of the consolidated threats.
And then there's Israel. Israel today said that it struck 60, give or take, targets of Hezbollah, weapons storage facilities, command centers, launches, other infrastructure. The IDF has been putting out video like this. Where do you believe Israel goes from here? As yes, they continue to strike, but also those right outside their borders who want to do harm to them.
Hezbollah has not been striking consistently into Israel, but Israel's taking the opportunity to service targets in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. The thing that's encouraging to me is the Lebanese government is making some pretty strong statements that Hezbollah has got to stop. I know that's just words, but I think those words combined with Israeli actions are going to take good effect.
President Trump said 4 to 5 weeks the other day. Tonight, given everything that you've seen, do you think we're still on that timeline?
Blake, I think it's important that he says that because the regime in Iran can't believe that we're going to walk away in a week. They need to believe that we have staying power so they don't set up a strategy where they're just trying to outlast us. And I'm happy the president is saying 4 to 5 weeks, whether that's true or not.
No matter what you think of the strikes, at this point, if you don't believe what the president is saying involving Iran, given last year and this year, I guess good luck to you.
They would be wise to listen.
It would probably be wise to listen. Retired Brigadier General John Teichert, thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Blake.
it. All right, still to come. By the way, as I should mention, Operation Epic Fury involves the largest regional concentration of American firepower in a generation. Remember we were telling you about the buildup with all of this? Now we see it. New details tonight on the 4 Army reserves who died supporting Operation Epic Fury, the Iranian strikes causing gas prices to jump, the stock market to tank, but the president says he has a plan for that. And Israel pummels an Iranian-backed proxy in Lebanon. The Israeli ambassador to the United States joins me tonight. Then later, the president just announced 9,000 Americans have evacuated the Middle East safely. We'll take you inside the plan to bring them back. As we keep our eyes on the Middle East tonight and the strikes against Iran continue, the Department of War now announcing the names of 4 of the 6 troops killed in Operation Epic Fury. The 4 are Army Reserve soldiers. Captain Cody Cork, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida. Sergeant First Class Noah Titans, 42, of Bellevue, Nebraska. Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, 39, of White Bear Lake, Minnesota. And Sergeant Declan Cody, 20 years old, of West Des Moines, Iowa. They were assigned to the 103rd Sustainment Command in Des Moines, Iowa. The War Department saying they died on Sunday in Kuwait. As the commander-in-chief said, there will be casualties. And tonight we learn of the first 4 who are killed in Operation Epic Fury. Well, the U.S. continuing the operation against Iran today, targeting the regime's missile launchers and drones. The effects of war now also spilling into the economy as Iran threatens traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, a key pathway for the world's oil supply. President Trump offering military escorts now for oil tankers traveling through, but also acknowledging the gas prices are on the rise.
People felt it's something that had to be done. So if we have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop, I believe, lower than even before.
It comes as drivers got a bit of a surprise this morning. Gas prices jumping 11 cents overnight amid the conflict, an average now of $3.11 for a gallon of unleaded nationwide. With me now, Republican Senator Steve Daines from Montana, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for being with us tonight. Nice to see you. I just read those names out, and it's awful, and it brings war back home. Your thoughts as you see that on the screen.
It just brings it home, and just these are men and women from the heartland of America. Their families grieving now, and we express our condolences and pray for their comfort and care during this most difficult time. It's the worst news you want to receive. And I tell you, the reservists are some of our very best. I mean, they're truly those kind of citizen shoulders that are out there working, defending our country. And I'll tell you what, they did not die in vain.
We're learning that Israel is stepping up the attacks at this moment inside Iran. How comfortable are you with the possibility of this war lasting, as the president described it, 4, maybe 5 weeks?
Well, I had the briefing today with Secretary Rubio, with Secretary Hegseth. Okay. We had General Kane there, as well as head of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. And the public comments, the same we heard, is that it's going to probably be a 4 to 6 week type of endeavor. They are not going to leave any stone unturned. They're going to get in there and finish the mission. It's very important when you have a military engagement, you have a clear objective. They've got a very clear objective. Number 2, use overwhelming force. You never go in to a conflict with half-hearted force. It's immoral to do so. So they're in there with overwhelming force that we're seeing. And the other clear message, you heard this from Secretary Rubio, you heard from President Trump, the tempo and the cadence is only going to increase. Right. As we're starting to get air superiority, we're going in there, we are going in there to absolutely destroy all the capabilities the Iranians have in terms of the possibility of ever building a nuclear.
I don't mean to play semantics here, but the president had said 4 to 5 weeks, and as I just hear you from the briefing, they said 4 to 6. So is the possibility that this could go maybe even longer than expected?
I don't think anybody has an exact end date on this. Okay. Clearly, already, as they say, you make a war plan, and then suddenly on day 2 you tear it up because you have to adjust. We've seen that with the other Arab countries now joining us, which actually is good news. One thing Iran has done is unified the entire Middle East against Iran. And now we've got our key friends and allies who want to join with us. They want strike packages. They want to get in there and join the fight and take out the Iranian capabilities.
So as President Trump said today, if we have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as that ends, the prices are going to drop. He did acknowledge that gas prices are going up. They've been up, crude oil prices up 11%, futures, just in 2 days here. Are we going to see gas prices? This always trickles down to the pump. How comfortable are you if we start to see gas prices rise as well across Montana potentially?
Well, it's very important to all of us, but I think we have to remember gas prices are at a 5-year low. So we're at a good place related to the 5-year arc. But remember what happened back in 1973 when there was the war of Yom Kippur, the Arab oil embargo. Oil prices then quadrupled. Why aren't we seeing actually a higher increase in oil prices? That's because since 1973, compared to today, we are now the largest producer of oil in the world. The United States of America is. And that's why we've had a buffer. If this were back in 1973, back when we were dependent on the Middle East for most of our oil, very different situation. So we're going to see a bump up, no doubt about it. But I think that
how high of a bump?
Nobody knows that's going to be here. But you see what President Trump is doing, though. What he's doing is he's now going to be allowing U.S. Navy escorts to protect the ships coming through the Strait of Hormuz. They've got about 20% of the world's oil goes through there. And second, we're going to be backstopping the insurance for the DFC to make sure that they'll take the financial risk because the United States of America will be backing them up from an insurance viewpoint. So that's going to be very important. Remember, we've sunk the Iranian Navy. They're gone. There's no more Iranian Navy. And so we have to watch out for mines in the Strait of Hormuz. But the president's taking action now to make sure we keep the flow going.
Here was your colleague, other side of the aisle, Chuck Schumer, earlier today.
America wants this president to pay attention to the problems at home, not the problems overseas, particularly when no one has any idea of what the real rationale is. It changes every hour.
Is he wrong there when he says America wants the president to pay attention to the problems at home, not the problems overseas?
The problems at home here are problems overseas right now, to literally the threats to the homeland. This is the first president that finally took action against the imminent threat of the Iranian regime. Think about 47 years of ayatollahs. There have only been 2 ayatollahs in 47 years in Iran. One for the first 10 years, the other one for 36 years.
Do you know what the rationale is, as Chuck Schumer labels it? It changes every hour. You were at that briefing today. Can you summarize it?
That's Chuck Schumer making some political points. We should be rallying around our troops and supporting them in this very important endeavor.
All right, we'll leave it there. Steve Daines with us tonight. Senator, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Blake.
Appreciate it. All right, by the way, the price of gasoline in the United States, as we mentioned, $3.11 on average. In the latest reading from AAA, that marked the largest one-day increase since you got to go all the way back to 2005. As the senator notes, yes, it is low, but also kind of a jump we haven't seen in a couple decades here. All right, the U.S. deals a devastating blow to the Iranian regime's drones after the regime unleashes attacks on U.S. embassies. And the Secretary of State issues a plea to Americans trapped in the Middle East as the administration races to pull them from the conflict zone. Other side of the break, the Israeli ambassador to the United States with us live. Bottom of the hour, the top story remains what we're watching across the Middle East tonight as we are now 90 hours into Operation Epic Fury, which is engulfing virtually the entire Middle East. Just hours ago, U.S. Central Command releasing this video right here, striking Iranian drones, saying they are, quote, no longer a tolerable risk. The commander-in-chief, President Trump, says the joint attack on Iran is in the interest of peace down the line.
The fact is that people are happy what we did. And you could never, and I've always said it, you could never have had true peace in the Middle East if Iran was allowed to go, even beyond the nuclear. If Iran was allowed to have look at all the missiles they built.
Americans, though, scrambling to leave the Middle East by the thousands. President Trump saying today that more than 9,000 Americans have already safely returned home. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying evacuation plans are ramping up.
We have about 1,500 Americans that are requesting assistance with departure. The impediment we're facing now, in many cases, we've had a couple instances in which we have planes in the air and on the way, and unfortunately the airspace gets closed and they have to turn back around. So we're working through those challenges.
Live look, Capitol Hill, Trump administration officials held a closed briefing with lawmakers on the strikes. Ahead of that briefing, as you heard there, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, spoke once again in support of the administration's decisions.
The President of the United States made a decision. This is intolerable. The President said this is the weakest they've ever been. If we don't hit them now, a year from now, or a year and a half from now, no one will be able to touch them. We were going to go first. He was not going to run the risk that they could attack us before we could hit them.
And all this comes as both sides of the chamber will go on the record to vote on a war powers resolution.
It's now the Congress's responsibility to go on record because Donald Trump has unconstitutionally and illegally chosen to launch a war.
I think the president was perfectly within his rights to take the steps that he took. I think it was a necessary step in order to protect American lives.
Our Joe Khalil live up on Capitol Hill with the very latest there. Joe?
Yeah, Blake, and I do just want to let you know that Speaker Johnson just got to the pool camera now, so get in my ear, let me know if you want to take that. The briefings here just ended now. It was the Senate briefing followed by the full House getting a briefing from Rubio, Hegseth, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, and the CIA director. The reaction that we've been getting really does fall along party lines. Democrats coming out saying they didn't hear anything about a game plan. They heard no plan for what comes after. Several Democrats said that the administration has stumbled into this conflict, and they did not hear anything in terms of intelligence that showed Iran was going to imminently strike the United States. Republicans came out with a totally different view and said, essentially, look, Iran was at some point going to be a serious nuclear threat, that their nuclear program was going to come to a head. President Trump, they say, acted decisively. They're okay with the conflict as they've seen it so far. And Rubio defended whether they were acting within the bounds of the law. This is what Secretary Rubio said today.
We've complied with the War Powers Act, even though we believe it's unconstitutional, as has every other administration. We've complied with we've over-complied with the law and what it requires. This is an action by the president to address a real threat.
And Blake, we got a chance to also ask Secretary Rubio some questions. He said that the next couple of days, strikes are going to significantly ramp up on Iran, several missile targets. So we were watching here for reaction from lawmakers as that happens, and this conflict goes even deeper in the next few days here.
Joe K, live for us tonight, Capitol Hallways. Joe, thank you. With me now, Dr. Michael Leiter. He is the Israeli ambassador to the United States. Mr. Ambassador, I thank you so much for being with us tonight. We were just hearing that there are operations taking place inside Iran from Israel. What can you tell us about them?
Our campaign continues, Blake. First of all, good evening, and thank you for having me. Look, our joint campaign continues unabated. The objective is victory. The objective is to take apart this terrorist edifice that exists in Tehran. We've been successful in striking 4 the major command centers today in the middle of Tehran, which is effectively causing cracks in the chain of command. So they're finding it very difficult to get orders from Tehran out to the field. This is a tremendous accomplishment when it comes to military command. So they're finding it difficult to implement. We have tracked down their radars systems that are tracking us. We've taken them out. We've taken out their missile launchers, and we've taken out their surface-to-air missiles, allowing us to take full control over the skies of Iran. Now we've got to pursue the rest of the IRGC and the other security forces to fully break down this edifice and cause it to collapse.
Ambassador, I hear you on the operations and on the how you went about it today and what was accomplished. As you very well know, there is a conversation among some here in this country about why this was needed and why this was needed now. What would you say to the American public, sir, on why this strike, the strikes, plural, were needed at this point? What would the message be to the American public from your perspective?
Well, I don't think the American public wants to wait for the missiles that were fired into Saudi Arabia and Jordan and into Europe to find their way into the United States. Look, one of the things that we learned from the 20th century is that when somebody says they're intent on killing you, you might listen to them. That was Nazi Europe, and these are new Nazis in Iran. And they say they're going to destroy Western civilization. They say openly they're going to destroy Israel first, the little Satan, then they're going to go on to destroy the great Satan of the United States. They were developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Okay, that was the program. They didn't get there yet, but they were going to get there. They got to medium-range ballistic missiles, which hit Europe yesterday. Now, let's understand, if you had any doubt about their intentions, you see them firing wildly into Saudi Arabia, into Qatar, into Kuwait, into the Emirates, into Jordan, and into Israel, and into Europe. Now, do you have any doubt that these people, these lunatics, these theocratic, apocalyptic tyrants will have any question about tipping those missiles with nuclear warheads? I mean, imagine if the missiles they fired today had nuclear warheads.
On that front, Ambassador, Steve Witkoff said on Fox News last night that when he was negotiating with the Iranian negotiators, that they told him that they had enough enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs. Was that Israel's assessment as well? And if so, how close were they to be able to get there to potentially be able to use them?
I think it's really important to pay attention to exactly what Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said. He said the Iranians came to him in the first meeting and presented that. They actually were so arrogant and so confident in their position that they came and said, we have 642 kilograms of 60% uranium, enriched uranium, which in a week can become weaponized. And they weren't going to withdraw from that position. Now, we knew that for a long time, that's where they're at, that's where they're going. Please appreciate the fact that when you have 60% enriched uranium, it'll take a week for them to get to 90%, and then all they have to do is weaponize. One of the targets that we struck today was actually the site in Tehran where the Ayatollahs take the enriched uranium and connect it with delivery systems, with these missiles. That's what the intention of this plant was, to connect the enriched uranium with the missile delivery system. Once that happens, and they take it underground, that was their plan after Midnight Hammer. Their plan was to build this plant as far underground as possible so that even the B-2s couldn't reach them. Now, once you get to a point where that's impenetrable, there's nothing you can do about it. So when you're talking about imminent, you don't want to wait for these missiles to be in the sky. You want to take care of this as soon as possible so they don't reach a point of no return. And that's what the brilliance of this campaign of Roaring Lion and Epic Fury, Israel and United States, the two most powerful air forces in the world, are implementing right now.
Ambassador, there was a question that was asked of President Trump today, especially after the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, yesterday suggested that maybe the United States was following the lead of Israel here. And the president was asked today in the Oval Office, he said, did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Here was what President Trump said, and then I'll pick it up on the other side.
Based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready and we were ready.
How would you answer that question, Mr. Ambassador? Did Israel force the hand of the United States to launch these strikes against Iran?
You know, I think this whole conversation about the president being forced is very insulting. You know, one day we hear he's not consulting enough. The other day we hear that he's being dragged into this. President Donald Trump is not somebody that's dragged into anything. I've been in meetings with him in the Oval Office many, many times, and I haven't ever seen him with a sign on his forehead, "I'm here for the dragging." Okay, I mean, the whole discussion is very, very insulting to him, to us, to the whole operation. Look, we came, Prime Minister of Israel came to the United States 6 times, 7th time hosted the president in Jerusalem. We presented our case. We presented the intel. We showed who Iran is from 1979 and the taking of American hostages and holding them for 444 days, to the slaughter of your Marines in Beirut in 1983, to really instigating international terrorism now for 47 years. This has been the #1 exporter of state terrorism around the world. They've destabilized, they prevented peace. They are now firing missiles indiscriminately into their neighbors. And this is what they would do tomorrow if they had the capability of doing it. President Trump is leading an operation right now to prevent the world's #1 purveyor of terrorism from stopping to spread chaos, death, and destruction around the world. I think it needs to be applauded.
Ambassador, I just interviewed one of the senators. I don't know if you heard my interview in the segment before, who was in the meeting today, who got the briefing from top cabinet members. And the senator told me that they were told that this operation could last 4 to 6 weeks. That squares with what President Trump had said publicly, which was 4 to 5 weeks. From your perspective, from Israel's perspective, how long do you anticipate this lasting?
Well, we have to go and pursue this according to plan. We have to stick to plan. And plan is victory. The plan is regime collapse, where there will not be a regime in Tehran which will pursue nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles that can hit innocent people and create mayhem in the world. It could take 3 weeks, it could take 6 weeks, it could take less or more. The important thing is that we achieve victory. When people talk about regime change, that's not our business. Our business here is to prevent any government in Tehran from being a malign entity, from being able to shoot ballistic missiles and achieve nuclear weapons. Once we achieve that, we're going to leave it to the people of Iran to choose their next government. Hopefully, the Iranian opposition, which is huge, it's 80% of the population. We saw them come into the streets last month. 40,000 people gave their lives for change. They come out to the streets and they say, we want a transitional government which in a year's time will give us free, open, democratic elections so we can have a new future. You know, after Israel, the Iranian people are the most pro-Western people in the Middle East, and we can have a great relationship and change the Middle East.
Dr. Michael Leiter, Israeli ambassador to the United States, appreciate the time and for jumping on with us tonight. Thank you, sir. Hope you come on back soon.
Blake.
Of course.
Good evening.
Good evening to you as well. Still to come tonight, the strikes through U.S. defenses that hit our bases. There's an obvious question tonight. How is it that Iran's drones were able to strike on U.S. military bases? And it's happened several times now. What happens? And what we're learning from an expert on the other side.
Breaking news, the reign of terror coming from Iran may finally be ending.
What you're looking at behind us here is the first major retaliation that we've seen in the last couple of hours.
For continuing coverage on the ground, stay with News Nation.
All right, fire breaking out tonight near the U.S. consulate in Dubai after a drone struck a parking lot. That drone, of course, likely launched by Iran, and it comes just hours after smoke was seen rising from the U.S. embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, hit by 2 suspected Iranian drones as well. President Trump today assuring the public the U.S. has massive firepower in the region to handle the barrage of attacks, whether they're from drones or other weapons.
But we have unlimited middle and upper ammunition, which is really what we're using in this war. And we have really an unlimited supply.
And tonight, we are learning that for the first time, the United States military has used that right there on your screen. The first combat use of Lucas drones, reverse engineered actually from the Iranians, one-way attack weapons that are now being used in Iran this evening. Joining me now, military analyst Major Glenn Ignacio, retired Special Operations Commander in the U.S. Air Force, where he was also a pilot. Nice to see you, sir. Always good to have you on. Talk to me about this Lucas drone, because it's in the theater now for the first time. Iran has been using these things for years, and now they're coming their direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's reverse engineer is basically the same design as that Shaheed, and we sort of turned it back on them and give them sort of a taste of their own medicine. These are the same types of drones that we've seen tremendously used in Ukraine that Iran gave, of course, to Russia. And these are the same systems that are being shot against us. But this was literally taking the same technology and then launching into Iran, because, again, you could do it large volume and only costs about $30,000 versus the other missiles that could be up to $4 million.
Is this the future?
Yeah, unfortunately, it really is. If you take a look, I think Ukraine really turned the dynamics of warfare from two different ways. A capability that can really sneak in and be very tactical and precise, also to things that are only like 10, 15, or as we mentioned, up to $50,000 versus the missile systems that cost millions to either launch that are offensively or even defensively.
We saw today the two scenes at the embassies, right? And we know that 6 American soldiers have already lost their lives. And when you talk about protecting Americans abroad and protecting our embassies, and Iranian drones, which is their main source of weapons, or one of them, at least at the onset of this, I think there might be some folks tonight, Major, who say, you know, how did that happen? How can we not protect it? And there's been some reporting out there, the president even today talking about a Wall Street Journal piece that says maybe we're low on sort of defensive munitions. Where are we tonight on that front?
Yeah, great question. And, you know, I'm apolitical in my approaches, but let's really take a look at this. You know, every system is not 100% proof, right? And I think even just from our perception from missions in Venezuela, Abbottabad, and others, we're sort of complacent to think that we are very successful in everything. And so when things get through, we do have an emotional response. But let's take a look at these drones can be launched in a tremendous amount of volume to get in. What we saw before against Israel is we saw a lot of our coalition fighters and attack aircraft taking out these drones and being rather successful. Now, those same types of fighters and aircraft are protecting our high-value assets, our tankers, our command and control. They're also doing strikes. So the assets that were successful before are being utilized to do these sort of strikes against the ballistic missiles and these other drone facilities. So there is a strain as far as our resources. In addition, back to the Patriots, we are seeing the UAE, Saudi, and others asking for more, and we are short on that. And the reason for it is a lot of these Patriot missiles did go since 2023 to Ukraine. So overall, they've tried to pick up the production, but they are limited.
What do you mean by what do you mean by strain?
Yeah, when I say strain, it's just the numbers. So take a look at, say, Patriot. Patriot missile launches and hits anything, say, within the atmosphere. Those are about 4 million a pop, and there's about 8 missiles per launcher, and there's usually 3 launchers across the package. So those are the volumes. The same thing, THAAD, that's terminal high altitude. These can hit ballistic missiles, even things outside the atmosphere. Same thing. They're $8 million a piece, and about the same time, eight launchers. So those volumes have been used, again, tremendously from Ukraine, and then in this particular area. It's a big launch. I never thought that Iran would launch into the UAE at the numbers they have, because the leader of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah are married to Iranian wives. So I'm very surprised that the volume launched at those cities.
Here was President Trump today, and then we'll pick it up.
We've had a very, very powerful impact, because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down. The big scale heading goes now. They no longer have air protection. They no longer have any detection facilities at all left, and so they're gonna be in for a lot of hurt.
What do you expect the next 24 hours to be like?
Well, like you said, with the air defense, we now have the ability to have real air dominance. So we have our aircraft sitting overhead, where we don't do pre-planned missions to take out these particular strikes. They're literally sitting over there, see a target, being able to take the strike out near real time. So again, Iran is about 600,000 square miles, about a sixth of the United States. And I think that what we're going to do is we're going to prosecute this similar to what we did in Iraq, which is what we call kill boxes. We'll see as much as we can, but they'll prosecute terrain after terrain after terrain to make sure that we take out any of these drone sites. They could be buried underground. great intelligence, but again, we got to do this methodically. Ballistic missiles are number one big threat. They can reach Equatorial Greece. And then again, these drones. But that's the biggest focus, is to take out their offensives. Major Glenn Ignazio with the insight tonight. We'll be talking again soon. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Always. As the U.S., you got it. This ongoing battle, this ongoing war continues, a reminder, 6 U.S. lives have been lost. We are now learning about those who died for our country. After the break, we'll show you them. Well, as the strikes against Iran carry on this evening, it's important to remember the lives already lost in this conflict. The Department of War announcing the names of 4 of the 6 troops killed in Operation Epic Fury. They are Army Reserve soldiers Captain Cody Cork, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida; Sergeant First Class Noah Teichens, 42, of Bellevue, Nebraska; Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, 39, of White Bear Lake, Minnesota; and Sergeant Declan Cody, just 20 years old, from West Des Moines, Iowa. And tonight, our Next Star affiliate, WKDY, reporting that the Kentucky service members were among those who died in the attacks. Officials say the soldiers based from Kentucky were assigned to the standalone headquarters in Fort Knox, the 1st Theater Sustainment Commands. The commander-in-chief warned that there would be casualties, and tonight the Department of War acknowledging and identifying those 4 brave American soldiers. Our coverage continues here on News Nation. Elizabeth Vargas reports. Coming up next, she'll have Congressman Mike Lawler from the Foreign Affairs Committee here on News Nation in moments. I thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. We'll be back tomorrow. Elizabeth starts right now.